Greetings, friends. I was debating a woman on X, and she believed in feminism and that there are no prescribed roles for the sexes, and that to assert any form of patriarchy or the idea that women should submit to their husbands is a blasphemous, terrible, stupid idea. That was kind of the theme. And she said, and this is a quote, "You don't love someone if they have to obey you. That's not love, that's ownership." And I responded to her, well, what about obeying God or obeying our parents, at least when we're children? This is a form of authority. Does that mean that we don't love our parents if we have to obey them? Or if they require us to obey them, then they don't love us? Is that what the implication is? That's insane. And she mentioned that men need women. So because men need women, they can't have any authority over them. Somehow that just follows. How does that follow? That's not a question she was entertaining. The fact that men need women, and in fact women need men, has nothing to do with the question of authority, over which of the sexes should have authority over the other. And I don't mean a tyrant who has 100% this manipulative control. I mean the role of the leader, the role of the patriarch. Someone has to fill that role, and it has traditionally been men. It must be men, because it cannot be women without the civilization falling apart. You can try it for a few generations, but everything falls apart. And even as things fall apart, they remain patriarchal because men dominate the military, the police, politics, and all of the important, powerful decisions that are made continue to be made by men. But that continue as the society becomes more feminized and women come into these fields. The fact that there are females in these industries, in these jobs, in these traditionally masculine roles does not change the fact at the end of the day that women are subservient to men in the sense that men run the world. They make all the important economic decisions. They wage the wars. They lose the wars, they win the wars, but they are the movers and the shakers. Not all men, but the ones who are movers and shakers inevitably end up being men by a 99% amount. I told her, and I think this is the problem for feminists in general, that they equate love with power. For them, if you don't give power to someone, then you don't love them. A sign that you love someone is you giving them power. And this is a very distorted, selfish way to view love. Now imagine a general commanding his troops. Now, of course, there are examples where the general doesn't care about his troops, and he acts as a tyrant. That happens in history. But there are also many cases where the general respects his troops, and he leads them to victories, and his troops respect him, and you might say love him. The same way any demagogue can be said to be loved by his people. Now this is a situation of clear authority, extremely formal authority, to the point where disobeying authority could mean death. And yet, is the general necessarily a tyrant by virtue of being a general and commanding his troops? No, he must lead his troops. And it is true that in the modern age, the general is often well behind the front lines, not putting himself at personal risk, which is not good. But traditionally, the generals tended to be leading their troops, at least on the front line, sometimes leading them right into battle, and often dying, often suffering the same travails as their soldiers. Nowhere during all of that did they cease to be the authority. Nowhere during that did they cease to be capable of commanding men, possibly to their deaths. And they might die themselves, as could happen. I'm explaining this to dismantle the stupid notion that authority means you hate the person you are exerting authority over, that you deprive them of all power, that you wish to basically control them like an automaton. That's a completely distorted, stupid view. And this lady I was communicating with mentioned that she was married. She brought this up as a way of saying that I'm right because in my marriage, my husband has no authority over me and we have a happy marriage, according to her. I didn't get to ask whether they had kids, but that doesn't change the fact that this can be unhealthy and can be wrong ethically for the society. For men not to recognize that they have authority over the wife, this is bad for society. You may think you have a good relationship. I can't imagine it being a good lesson for your kids to learn if you happen to have any, which many couples these days don't. But even if you thought it turned out well for the kids and yourself, this is not healthy for the society at large. Men are the natural leaders. They must lead in the marriage. They must lead the family. And they require the wife to work with them. They need the wife. They need the kids to respect them as well. It's called responsibilities and duties. Now, because I am a single man, my message is not going to convince any women, because only married men could convince, or not convince is the wrong word, but have more effect on influencing the behavior of females in our society, because a married man already has a woman. So in the eyes of the women who have not taken the traditional role of starting a family, raising kids, this is going together with the authority question, because it's moving in the direction of what is the traditional norm for men and women and families. But it is also submitting to the man. As the Bible teaches, the woman should submit to the husband, and husbands love their wives. Loving meaning not so much emotional. I mean, as St. Paul was using the word love, my understanding is that it meant an action of actually respecting and taking care of your wives, not abusing them, treating them well. This is how he meant the word love in that context. And this is the Christian teaching. It's good to have the emotional feelings, but at the end of the day, loving is more than just an emotion. It's an action. It's a work. But nowhere in there did the man cease to be the authority. And nowhere in there did the woman cease to have the obligation to follow the lead of her husband. Sometimes the man messes up. He does the wrong thing. That doesn't mean the woman is completely at the mercy of her husband. There's the wider community. There's the kin of the man and the woman, and there's the church. These are all extra familial levels that she can appeal to in any serious situation. So there's so many misconceptions around this idea of authority. It basically makes the idea of having authority as if you're a psychopath. Meanwhile, what happens in our current world? We see increasing authority centralized in bureaucracies with psychopaths. And they all claim to hate the patriarchy and hate traditional power, or at least that's what they think. And this woman believed that she could be a Christian. Well, I'm here to tell all the feminists that you can't be a Christian and a feminist. Those two things don't mix. You can interpret the Bible however you want, according to your fancy, to read these things into your own preconceived worldview, which is satanic, or you can submit to the historical understanding and the historical church, which really would have been the same even apart from Orthodoxy, even in Roman Catholicism and most of the Protestant churches until only a few hundred years ago. The idea that women should not submit to their husbands would have been seen as antithetical to the religious teachings of Christianity. This would not have been acceptable. And it would have been accepted primarily because that's the natural way that life goes in the village, in the countryside. These are farmers, there are famines, there are serious things they have to overcome. There's no decadence that could allow something like feminist ideas to arise. And the idea that the man has authority over the woman should not be assumed to mean that the woman has no power. That's just completely stupid. Oh, we've got patriarchy. We've got the man in the role of the leader, and you have to submit to him. Oh, therefore, zero power on the woman's side. Therefore, it's just no power, no agency for the woman. Oh, how do we get to that conclusion? Oh, because it's just a zero-sum game. Either one person has all the power and the other person can't. That's just the way power is, apparently. Well, no. No, why would you think power is like that? Obviously, the woman still has power in the domestic sphere, and we all know the ways that women can exert power over men. That never stops. That never stops. Women always have those abilities. It's the fact that their roles are formally acknowledged that allows the family to function well and the society to function well. It's just a formal acknowledgement which guides the natural inclinations of men and women to behave in different ways. And there may always be outliers of men who behave like women, which is not good, of women who behave like men, at least like women scholars, women excelling at masculine things. These may be minorities and outliers. But in this traditional society, they would just be recognized as outliers and they could still flourish. It just wouldn't be encouraged and it wouldn't be the norm. It would be like, oh, well, that's an interesting woman kind of bucking the trend. But that doesn't mean you make this ideology that therefore all women are going to rise to the level of this outlier woman that can do things that a man can do. That doesn't follow. Both men and women have agency in that they can choose to follow the duties that are given to them by virtue of their creation by God. They can freely choose to have the agency and exert the choice to fulfill your duty, or you can choose not to. You're exercising agency either way. This woman mentioned that she was the breadwinner of the family, that she brought in the major share of the income to support herself and her husband, and I don't know if they had kids. That's not a position that most men would want to find themselves in. Maybe if you have a good relationship with your wife and you've already been successful in life and made a lot of money, then it's different. Oh yeah, honey, you can go and make money. But being the man starting out in a marriage and the woman is the breadwinner and she's supporting you, my goodness, that certainly goes against the order laid down by God. That's really disturbing, and that would be so demeaning for a man. How demeaning that must be. What kind of a weak and pathetic man could put himself in that position? That's very sad. So again, I emphasize that the right, conservatives or traditionalists, Christians, in the real sense of the word, need married men to influence these women and other men to accept these traditional norms and save our civilization. Because, of course, they're not going to listen to people like me. They're just going to call you an incel, a loser, a racist, whatever, and our reach is going to be limited by that. So we really need the married men on our side. But so many of them are simps and cucks and non-Christians, hedonists, like these dinks, these dual income, no kids couples that celebrate their dual income, no kids lifestyle in materialistic videos where they consume material things, and it's because their life has no other meaning at all. And it's vindictive to life itself. It's mocking creation by celebrating the fact that you are not procreating and that you are engaging in the formally sacrosanct or sacrament of marriage, because marriage is a sacrament. That's the only reason for marriage is in a religious context, specifically a Christian context, but even in other cultures it would have been a religious rite. There's a foundation religiously to build a family unit, reproduce children for the benefit of all. And there might be other reasons like having a life partner and growing and that kind of stuff. That can be true too, but it's fundamentally a religious rite. So there's not even any point to call yourself married or be married apart from a religious context. There's absolutely no reason to do that. And I wanted to tie in another topic. It's related. It could have been a separate video, but I'll just tie it in here because it has to do with this question of women asking why aren't men stepping up to protect them in public as cities become more dangerous with migrants and homeless and junkies who can abuse them in places like New York City and West Coast cities, even here in Toronto. could be increasing these random incidents of violence directed against all people, but direct against women, white women of course, but all kinds of, any women can be assaulted. The question is, where are the men? Why aren't they coming to rescue these women? Now, the primary reason is that we don't recognize any kin. So you get that in a situation of anonymity. In the big city, this would already be a problem if we didn't have multiracialism and multiculturalism and mass immigration. Even if all the people were white, and you would be more likely to help someone from your own race, because you would see them as an extended kin group. But even then, in a city of millions of people, the anonymity would decrease the inclination of humans to intervene, of men to intervene. But it is the natural role of men to be the protector and to step up and protect women in these situations, and that's a good thing. I'm not trying to discourage that, but the main reason that it doesn't happen is the fact that we've got so many different tribes in here. There's so much lack of trust. Even the white culture doesn't trust itself, so there's no spiritual connection there. And that's the fundamental reason why these terrible things can happen in the broad daylight. Now, the second reason is that men are punished by the legal system for intervening if the culprit is a non-white. So if the culprit is a Latino or a black, specifically those groups, but it could be other, as long as it's non-white, and he intervenes to protect other people, the person that he's restraining could sue him, and he could be sent to prison. He could be fined a huge amount of money. It doesn't matter if the person is mentally unstable that is causing the problem. It doesn't matter if the person causing the problem is already an established criminal. The system persecutes the man. We've seen this happen in various cases. It happened some time ago in New York City, where a former Marine headlocked a man who was basically in the process of about to assault people on a train. And then that crazy man ended up dying because he was medically unstable. So the former Marine who did this, which was a good act, which in a healthy society would be seen as the right thing to do, he was punished very heavily for this. So feminism itself says that women don't need any men, and that there aren't any traditional gender roles. That's all a construct based on a psychopathic accumulation of 100% power to the man. So women can do what men can do. Women don't need men. But then the same women would be complaining when these incidents happen in the street. Where are the men? What's wrong with men? Well, we've already discussed multiculturalism, mass immigration. We've discussed how men are persecuted by the legal system if they get involved in this kind of thing. But at the end of the day, this ideology has its fair share of the blame. You do need men to be the protectors. We can all acknowledge that. Let them fulfill their role. Don't punish men for being natural, healthy men, fulfilling the duties that God gave them. Don't hinder them in that. Hasta luego, amigos.